Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andrea, and today we're going to talk about how I burned out at 23. I'm sure we're all very familiar with burnout. Burnout isn't something that just happens out of the blue, it's something that's built over time. I did so many things that led me to burnout, and I would say that my first mistake that I made during my late teens up until my early 20s right now was thinking I know everything. I think we can all agree that when we're young, especially if we're going to college, we have a huge ego. Just in general, I feel like young people have huge egos, and I'm definitely one of them. And I just remember feeling like I just knew everything and like no one could tell me otherwise. You know, I respect my parents a lot, for instance, and I think they're very wise. But even when they tried giving me advice, in the back of my head, I was always like, no, but I still know better. And for instance, they would see me very exhausted with school and work, and they would tell me, hey, maybe you should try to just focus on school, or hey, maybe you should not take 5 classes and just take 4. We notice you're a little stressed out. And I would hear them and I would just feel like I'm being misunderstood, like they don't know what's good for me. I can handle this. And looking back now, I just realized that wasn't a smart decision what I was doing, and it ultimately led to my burnout. And I'm sure a lot of us can kind of relate with that. In my experience, I was a full-time student and I was working 2 jobs. And for some reason, I still felt like I didn't have a busy schedule. And in my free time, I would participate in extracurriculars. So that meant I had to attend meetings, I had to attend events. In my case, I'm referring specifically to my undergrad experience. I literally spent 4 years addicted to a feeling that kept me in this endless loop of work. I kid you not, it literally felt like working hard was my passion. I thought it made me so happy. I loved having like a hectic schedule. I loved talking about it too. I just felt really proud of myself, and just like the more things I had to do, the better I felt. When we're young, we kind of tell ourselves like, we can do it all. We're young, we have all the time in the world, we have all the energy in the world, and we feel like we're never going to get tired. But the truth is, whether you're young or not, things can still be overwhelming. You can still have too many things to do in a day and you need like a break. And that's just something I did not understand when I was younger. We really don't take time to listen to people who have already been through the things that we've been through, and listen to them when they say, hey, maybe you should have a lighter schedule. Hey, maybe you shouldn't take that extra class. But we're so focused on ourselves and like wanting to progress that we just kind of dismiss that. And even though we think we're so smart, it's just so funny because our body literally gives us a sign that we're exhausted, and we just choose to ignore it. When you're feeling like you don't want to get out of bed, your body's telling you, hey, I'm tired. When you see you have eye bags, your body's telling you, hey, I'm not getting enough sleep. When you're having constant headaches, your body's telling you something is stressing you out. Maybe you're doing too much, but we still choose to ignore it. It's just so funny to me how we always have these signs present, but we always choose to ignore them. And I think back now to that endless loop I was in of working and just being addicted to having like a crazy schedule. And I'm like, how the hell was I fueled to do this? And it's like having this hectic schedule, like I said earlier, it fueled me. It gave me that energy to just get through anything, no matter what. And now I can barely do one task and I'm like super tired. So anyway, I'm thinking back to back when I was an undergrad, and I thought the way I would cope with my exhaustion was doing things that like were good for me, if that makes sense. Not by resting by any means, but by adding more to my schedule. So let me explain, because I think a lot of us do this. Instead of taking a break, for instance, let me have a couple hours to myself, I needed to find some way to fill it up. So if I had a free hour in my schedule, I would think, well, I need to do something productive that's good for me. So I would go to the gym for 1 hour. Even though I was super tired from work, super tired of doing homework, super tired of volunteering, whatever I was doing, I'm gonna go to the gym. And then if I had another hour, now it was time to give time to my friends and hang out with them. Even though mentally I'm super exhausted, I would still make the effort to go see them. And I'm not saying, hey, don't go see your friends when you're tired. Of course you want to make time for them. But I did this on top of having the most chaotic schedule. I would still never say no to hanging out. But I just thought this was the right thing to do, because in my head I'm like, I can't forget about my social life, you know? And then if I really had nothing to do, like I'm not going to the gym, I'm not meeting with anybody, I'd be home and, I would tell myself, I'm going to try to not be on social media too much to kind of give my brain a break. But then instead, I would be cleaning my room, doing some sort of activity. So I was like never actually taking a break. But in my head, I was tricking myself like, oh, what I'm doing good things. I'm cleaning, I'm giving time to my friends, I'm going to the gym. These are the things I'm supposed to do and that are supposed to make me feel more relaxed after work and after having school, which is a complete lie because I'm already exhausted from school. I'm already exhausted from my 2 jobs, from going to a bunch of meetings. And on top of that, I'm giving myself more tasks. But for some reason, I thought I was doing the right thing. And I don't know you guys, but I'm always trying to find ways to like get more energy. I decided to get off caffeine, and in that way, I thought I was gonna feel better about myself. So then I gave myself no excuse to ever be tired. So I was like working on taking care of myself, if that makes sense. But I was actually never giving myself any break at all. Oh, and another big one, I also decided to have a really clean diet, because I'm like, I need to feel fueled up for the day. And so then I have no excuse to feel bad for myself because I'm doing everything I can. So on top of all the activities that I would have, I would make sure I'm eating healthy and like making meals, y'all, takes a long time. And I would still do all these things. It's like I was trying so hard to suppress the fact that I wanted to collapse. Like, I'm so freaking tired. But I didn't even give myself the time to feel tired. I was like, no, I got this going on, this, that. I did all the things that a healthy person should do, a person that is happy should do, a person who wants energy should do. But somehow I actually never felt better after doing these things. Like, I think back to when I would hang out with my friends, and like, I love my friends very much, but a lot of the times I wasn't fully present, and I feel like they could notice that. And I always wondered, like, am I just awkward? What's the problem here? But the thing is, I just did a million things, and I have a million things on my mind, but I'm like, hey, I have to be here, and I'd be there, but I wouldn't actually enjoy the moment because I'm already thinking about the next thing. Same thing with like going to the gym. A lot of people find it really relaxing, but I remember when I would go to the gym, I was just very stressed out in terms of thinking like, okay, I can only be here for an hour. Am I gonna be able to finish my workout? I wasn't focusing on enjoying the moment because I have one thing after the other. And now looking back, I think to myself, these are good things to do. Going to the gym is great. Hanging out with your friends is great. Having a clean diet is great. All these things are great. But the only reason they weren't helping me is because I'm doing this on top of being a full-time student and a worker. How in the world do I expect this to be beneficial for me? I'm only gonna make myself more exhausted. So then fast forward after undergrad, I'm done, I'm super happy, graduation happens. And then I kid you not, one day I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I was so tired. And I remember just feeling like, oh, I'm just having a lazy day. I had a long week. But then I kept having this fatigue constantly. And it just wouldn't go away. I thought it was temporary, but it never went away. And I really do think it's just, I finally hit burnout and my body's like, you know what? We can't do this anymore. It wasn't until I literally was obligated to have a break because I was done with school. I was no longer working. So I was literally done. I reached my goal, woo. And I finally had a break. And it wasn't until that break where I realized, holy guacamole, like I am exhausted. And my body finally told me, hey, like we can't move. We can't do anything. We're not functional. Like I hit burnout. It was the worst thing ever. And I think a lot of it was just more intense because I'm also depressed. I don't know if the burnout kind of created my depression, but whatever. I just felt so tired, kind of sad, and just like a lot of things that would interest me, I didn't have the energy to do anymore. And when I finally hit burnout, that one day when I was in my bed and I couldn't get out, that's what I realized what had actually been driving me all this time to be so productive and work so hard. the real reason wasn't because I was passionate about working or anything. I was being driven by fear. I became so consumed with wanting to be successful. Like, I didn't even know what that meant. I think just being the daughter of immigrants, in my head, I was like, I have to be the best I can. And to me, at the moment, that meant graduating school and getting a good job. And I felt like, if I'm not working hard at all times, I'm gonna fall behind. I'm gonna end up failing, whatever that means. And that's what was really driving me, not my passion for anything or my liking of anything. It was just because I don't want to fall behind. I want to be successful. I want to do what everyone else is doing, even though everyone else isn't doing what I'm doing. Like, I just felt like whatever I did wasn't enough. And I didn't even want to give myself time to even think about, hey, maybe you're doing too much. Like, I didn't want to be like in my thoughts at all. I wanted to have something to do at all times. So then if I did fail one day, I could tell myself, hey, I did everything I could, which is so ridiculous because, I'm still young now, but I was even younger then to be having those thoughts. And, I've talked about this with my parents sometimes, and they're like, hey, but, working hard is the way you were able to do all that. And it's like, yes, you're right, but there's so many consequences to having worked so excessively. Like, I kid you guys not, like I seriously, I still remember all those nights I would stay up, and, it's been a couple years since then, and I'm still thinking about those nights that I would stay up and work really hard, and I still feel tired from those nights, like, as silly as that might sound. So I'm like, yeah, it led me to graduation, but hey, I could have still graduated without having that hectic schedule. And maybe mentally I'd be better now. And I think about now and my responsibilities now and how they've changed. And I would argue that I have a lot less work than I used to in the past, at least like on a daily basis. But somehow less work, even with this less work, I still feel really tired, and even more tired than I did before. Like, I look back and I'm like, whoa, how did I do all that? Like, I feel like I'm still suffering the consequences of burnout from a couple years ago. It's just so crazy to me how it was evident that I was experiencing burnout, but it didn't come clear to me until I had a flexible schedule. It's not until I've had this flexible schedule where I'm like, hey, I was overworking myself. I have so much time to myself now more. I have so much more time to myself where I'm able to really reflect on the fact that I was burnt out. And even now, with the more time that I have, I'm still suffering the consequences. Like, I feel exhausted. Sometimes I feel really detached from my work. I just feel like it feels meaningless in a way sometimes, but it's not. So in other words, working super hard left me fried. And, from my experience, I really do feel like I'm still suffering the consequences from that. And burnout isn't something that just goes away from one day to another. And it's scary once you hit it because I feel like you don't even recognize yourself sometimes. At least for me, I was like, who am I anymore? I thought I could do more. Sometimes it makes like my days just feel very meaningless. My self-esteem gets low because I'm like, why can't I do anything? It's just terrible all around. And if you could do things to try to prevent burnout, please do it. Like, I promise you, you're still gonna have your job if maybe you don't stay up an extra hour at night. That extra hour of sleep you get can be life-changing. I just get mixed feelings when I see pieces of advice that talk about, just switch your job to something that's more accommodating for you and your needs, and, work in something that you like. But let's be realistic here. If we could all work in something that we like, we would. But the fact is we can't, because it's hard to even just get a job, right? We're all just trying to survive out here. At least a lot of us are. And so I just want to provide you guys with what I think are some pieces of advice to kind of prevent burnout, some realistic ones. My first tip is don't take a long time wrapping up projects. So this doesn't apply to just people in school, but in work, in general, whatever you have to do. I feel like a lot of time we spend so much time on things and we try to perfect them. But the truth is, those extra hours you spend trying to perfect something, usually it doesn't make whatever you're doing significantly better. But what does happen is you end up spending a lot of extra time on it when you could have used that time for something else, whether that be self-care, going to sleep, going on a walk, something that's actually more beneficial for you. Like, I promise you, a lot of these things that we're doing are not worth those extra hours. What's going to happen is you're going to get overworked and then hit burnout quicker. You just, in my opinion, you have to really evaluate, is this worth putting a lot of work into and extra hours? Number 2, do not focus on too many things at a time. And this is something I learned recently. I used to be the queen of multitasking, but that is no longer true. Focus on mastering one thing at a time, whatever that might be, a skill, an assignment. You're just gonna save yourself from a lot of stress. And then it's like closing tabs on a computer. Rather than having so many open and working a little bit on each of them, just focus on getting one done so you can forget about it. Because remember, our brains can store a lot of information, but when you have so many things in your head, you're still gonna subconsciously think about them. And something else I wanna say, a lot of us do not know how to take a break. And, you know, I'm guilty of this. I used to think like at work, what is the purpose of breaks? Because for some reason I take a break and I still don't feel better after, like at all. And now I'm like, well, yeah, of course I don't feel better. All I do is go on my phone, scroll on social media, and somehow I expect to feel better. I'm not actually taking a break. The whole purpose of a break is to disassociate from your work, from a computer screen, because a lot of us I know work on computer screens. But if you're going from one screen to another, you're not charging properly. And I made this mistake a lot back then when I would study, when I was younger at least, where I'm like, well, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break. Then I'm like watching some YouTube video or just doing something that tires out my brain and my eyes. And then I'd be mad because I'm like, well, what's the point of taking breaks? They're just kind of, they feel like a waste of time. So my advice would be figure out what works for you in terms of like something that actually makes you feel like you take a break. That might be a little nap, going on a walk, talking to a friend on the phone, or some type of face-to-face interaction, maybe writing in a journal. I promise you these things will be worth your while. But I would also say these type of things take more effort in the beginning to kind of get used to, but the results from them are much better. But it is more tempting to just be on your phone. Things are easy, you know, you don't have to move from where you're sitting, but you don't feel better afterwards. So yeah, that's just my piece of advice. Learn how to take a break properly. Okay, so this next one I think is a huge contributor to burnout, which is not being open to help, criticism, or change. So let me explain. A lot of us, like I said, we think we know what we're doing all the time. We don't want criticism from others. We don't want help. And sometimes we're taking the long way to do things. Like, what if there is an easier way to do what you're doing, but you don't want somebody to help you or to let you know that information, you know? You're like, no, I want to do things my own way. But then that's actually counterproductive, because if you're open to hearing people out when they want to help you out, they might have something that's beneficial for you that can make your job easier. I also mentioned like being open to criticism, because I just think about my writing, for instance. When I would turn it in, I would hate looking at the comments my professors would leave, because I'm like, I don't want to change the way I write. But then I'm writing my papers, right? Let's say I'm writing an essay, and I'm like, oh, I know the professor's not gonna like this. I know I shouldn't be doing this. But I'm so stuck on the fact that like I want to keep that writing style. But then I'm stressing myself out because I know I shouldn't. And then I'm taking forever to revise it instead of just listening to the suggestions my professor's giving me. Look, I'm not saying you guys do this. This is just me. But it led me to be really stressed out with my papers and like hate writing. So yeah, I'm gonna hit burnout quicker because I'm hating what I'm doing. And it's all because I'm not being open to taking some criticism on my paper. Some constructive criticism. Like, that's ridiculous. And it's just not with papers, but I know a lot of us don't like changing the way we do things, even though the way or the style that we're doing them in is actually really stressful. But we just have such a huge ego that we don't want to change the way we do things. And you're just wasting your time doing that. I just think it's really important to be open to a new schedule, a new way of doing things. Like, And another tip I have to prevent burnout is don't rely on discipline. So I'm pretty sure a lot of us on the internet have heard how important having discipline is. And don't get me wrong, having discipline is super important. But recently, I don't know if I completely agree with this anymore, because let's be honest here, being disciplined works until it doesn't. We only have so much discipline in us, and relying on it in the long term is not going to be helpful, I think. Don't get me wrong, I think having discipline, we all need to have a little bit of discipline, but if you're like forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do just because you're being disciplined, in the long term, you might see the consequences of that. Like, being disciplined with work is important, right? But there's going to be times where like you're not going to be super productive at work, and that's okay. Like, if you're productive 80% of the time, but the other 20 you're not, that's completely fine. So maybe having discipline a majority of the time, but not the whole time, is okay. You don't have to be disciplined the whole time, because if you don't give yourself the space to not be disciplined, the moment that you aren't disciplined, which you will hit, I promise you, everybody does, you're going to be super hard on yourself, and it's just going to be terrible. So I think it's really important to kind of give yourself the space to not be disciplined every time. So then when you need discipline, it actually works for you. Okay, and last one. I'm sure a lot of us have heard this one. Listen to your body. So we're reminded of this constantly, get good sleep, eat good, and listen to your body. I don't know why we don't do these things. Even I'm super aware of it, and I sometimes kind of forget about it. But our body literally tells us when it's tired. So if you're up at 2 a.m. doing some paper, I promise you it can wait unless it's due that night. But, you can always try asking for an extension. But a lot of things can wait, especially if they're work related somewhere where you're not getting paid on the weekend. Don't be working out of work hours. Like, I know sometimes in my job or in jobs that I've had, I would work outside of work just to kind of freshen up or kind of catch up, because I always felt like I was super behind in anything, whether that be school or work. And I'm like, there's always space to be better and improve. I didn't pay attention a lot to these slides, or what my boss asked me. I don't know. I should be putting in more time for this. But the reality is, you should only really be working when you're getting paid, and it allows you to be a more productive employee when you are clocked into work. If you're going into work and then clocking out of work and then just working again at your house, like, you're not giving yourself any space to actually take a break and come charged to work the next day. I know a lot of us might feel like, no, but I need to play catch up, and like, no, you don't, okay? Because I used to be like that, and all it did was make me really tired. And in the long term, made me less productive. So you might think you're doing something good, but you're not. Okay, y'all, so that pretty much sums up how I hit burnout at 23 and just my experience with it, how I got there. A lot of my video, I think, was just talking a lot about how working hard isn't always a good thing, and working a lot, more specifically, isn't always beneficial for you. And working a lot is the number one thing you can do to hit burnout. So just keep that in mind. And I know it might sound like everyone hits burnout at some point, which I would say is true, but if you can, try to prevent it. I know this can sound unrealistic, but your 20s can actually be really enjoyable, and there's just little things that you need to tweak in your life that can actually make things a lot better. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts below. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.